Thank you, everybody who's working so hard on the gala. Ron and Gail, thanks for spearheading, setting things up with Hilton Garden. And again, speaking of the gala, one of the beneficiaries, Hattie Larlam, Jenny Dawes is here. So Jenny, would you like to come up and say a few words to us about Hattie Larlam? Thank you.
Thanks, Dave, and thanks everyone for your generosity and for continuing to consider Hattie Larlam as one of the beneficiaries for this event. And I'm so grateful that to have a couple of minutes to share with you today some of the work, the good work that Roseanne started for Hattie Larlam, and talk a little bit about how your gift helps the kids and adults that we serve. Hattie Larlam now has 8 babies that we care for at the Manaway facility. That's probably the greatest number of babies we've had since Hattie Larlam herself was rocking them. You can see here one of the big pushes that we are working on is ventilator-dependent babies. So 4 of the 8 babies we have right now, these are a few of them, enjoying some time off of the ventilator with our caregivers, are a part of this program. It's for transitional cases, babies who may be coming out of the NICU but are not quite ready to go home yet. But, you know, maybe with a little time at Hattie can kind of wean off the vents. Our respiratory therapy team kind of gets in there, you know, and takes care of them and gets them stable and able to breathe more and more without the support of the ventilator. So one of the important things about this program is that it takes babies who are fragile out of a hospital setting where they are at risk for infection. So this is a trend in care that we hope to be a big part of. And while we've always had babies and children that use ventilators, we are seeing so much more of this care that we are hoping to apply the funds that we might receive from Hudson Rotary Foundation to the purchase of 2 pieces of equipment. Well, 1 piece of equipment, 2 Airvo 2 ventilator support humidifiers. And if you want to take to the next slide, this is the technical part of your morning. I could get into more detail about why these are necessary, but you've just had breakfast. So we won't do that. But when you work at Hattie Larlam, you learn a lot about a lot of things that you might never know. And let's just imagine if you got through flu season, imagine if you couldn't cough on your own. Imagine if, you know, when you get that tickle in your throat, you don't have like enough, you know, you can't just swallow and just, oh, I'm back to normal. So these little devices are real workhorses. They take care of several things that we take for granted. Just walking around, talking right now. It controls the humidity and the temperature for people, the air that vented people use. If you have a tracheotomy, your temperature of the air that you breathe needs to be higher. Who knew that? So everybody at Hattie Larlam uses these, not just the vented babies. And some of them are on them all the time. Some of them are on them a few hours at a time. Some of them are on overnight. So they're in constant use. We really, you know, don't have enough to go around. Because what they also have done is take the job of several machines that so you'd see a child at bedside with 3 or 4 different machines, you know, down to 1, which is also much easier for the caregivers and less complex and less confusing. And every kid needs, you know, something different. Every machine is attuned to that child's needs. So this is really important. It really is a critical piece of the care that everybody at Hattie Larlam receives, particularly these babies, because it's you know, if you're having constant airflow issues, you know, that's a huge part of learning to breathe on your own. So that's what this does. I mean, you're keeping people breathing. That's I think you should feel good about that. You know, that's a pretty good use of your funds. And we just, if you want to go to the last slide, we just want to say thank you, especially from all the caregivers, the nurses, and the babies at Hattie Larlam, who are also very grateful for your ongoing support. Thanks. Any questions, let me know. Oh, yes.
How many do you have, and how many would you like to have?
2. Oh, I'm sorry. 2. Our request was for 2. And what we're doing is right now, as we get them more into service and expand the program, you know, they're those that are not used constantly, you know, we move them around. As you can see, that the one slide, it was really tiny. I mean, it's a powerful little machine. It's really only about that big, so we can move them from bedside to bedside as needed. But 2 would be great.
How much are they?
About $2,500.
Thank you, Jenny, for filling us in on the need at Hetty Larlam. And as much as you're happy that we're helping, we're happy that you're letting us help and to be a part of it. We really are. Any other announcements from the floor? If not? Oh, yes, James Field. Sorry.
Always some oddness with the audio visual. We're missing the antenna from one of our remotes. So if anyone knows, it's just like a little antenna that screws in here. So if anyone sees it or knows why it's not on here anymore, let us know.
Thank you, James. The mystery of the missing antenna. So if anybody sees it, I can count on you, Andy. Okay. George Snyder, introduction for today's speaker. Thank you.
Good morning again. Good morning, George. The Speakers Committee meets about once a quarter to select program themes for the coming 3 months. And when committee member Mike Swain proposed Local Heroes as the program theme for April, there was one name that came to everybody's mind just immediately, and that, of course, was our very own Ed Sogan, who last December was named Hudson's Citizen of the Year by HCTV. You think you know Ed, but you probably don't know it all. First, he's older than he looks. Having spent 6 years as a teacher in Maple Heights, another one at Southeast High School, and then 28 years with the Hudson Public School System, serving as a physical education teacher, football and track coach, and finally as athletic director from 1995 until his retirement in 2004. And if I add all that up, I think that makes him about 86. He's been married to wife Mary all these years, which I believe is a record for a starter marriage straight out of college. Honest to God, Mary and Ed fell in love on a study date in Heidelberg College's library. Third, Edward appeared to have lived his entire life in Hudson, but that's not true. He was born in Cleveland and grew up in Maple Heights, where he developed his lifelong passion for education and for athletics. Fourth, Ed would also appear to be a lifelong Rotarian, but that was only after leaving the Hudson JCs in order to associate with older retired people. Last but not least, retirement has failed to slow Ed down. As a founder and president of the Hudson City Schools Foundation, he was instrumental in raising $6 million to build the new football stadium and related athletic facilities. And in support of other civic projects, Ed has served on the Taste of Hudson board for many years. And finally, as fine master of our distinguished club, he has taken your dollars and mine in support of deserving charities. So ladies and gentlemen, in my belief that recognition is best appreciated by those who are still alive to receive it, please join me in welcoming to our podium our fellow Rotarian and Hudson Citizen of the Year, Ed Sogan.
Thank you. Before I start, in today's hub is a really nice article about the program that was last week at the high school for our seniors in regards to their transition from high school to college and beyond. It was a overwhelming success from everything that I heard. We have quotes in there from Ron Strobel and Catherine Sines in regards to the Rotary involvement in a sponsorship and how pleased we are to be part of the first year of this particular program, and I'm sure it's going to be around for years to come. Plus, it's going to be a cornerstone, I think, project that will be attractive to many other school districts. So we're really excited about how that came off. Apparently, according to Laura Gasborough, lunch for 400 seniors from Chipotle's was a task in itself. That they said that Chipotle's, it took them 10 hours to put together everything for that particular luncheon because everybody was eating at the same time. But great program, and the support of the Rotary was able to, again, provide the funds to get that off the ground, so it's exciting. The picture in front this is my wallet size, is from 1994 football season, and it's a double overtime victory against Wadsworth High School, our arch rival, back in the old Suburban League. And matter of fact, we're back in it again this year. But this was a tremendous game in regards to the kids, and we were able to punch this in on during the second overtime and win 27-24. At the bottom of the pile is Brian McCullough, who is currently an orthopedic surgeon and was a team doctor down in University of Miami, down in Oxford, Ohio. But the kids called this play. I remember going out to the huddle, and it's like, we're going to get this thing done. And the picture is kind of the agony of defeat and the joy of victory. As you can see, if you look at it closely, the kids from Wadsworth with their hands on their knees, and our kids are up in the air. We got a couple of offensive tackles that with their vertical leap is about a half of an inch jumping off the ground. But they called the play. It was just, it was a power 58 kick out. Our fullback did a great job. The offensive line blew them back, and Brian, under the pile there, I think he's crushed and flattened, but everybody was pretty elated after that victory. So I thought I'd bring that along. This is the one I had behind my desk at the athletic office for years. I'm going to use Jimmy's quote, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. So if you bear with me as I go through a little bit of extended personal history and then what this organization and Hudson means to me. My first memories, I was born in Cleveland at Mount Sinai Hospital, which is no longer in existence, but lived at 1759 East 33rd Street in between Payne Avenue and Chester Avenue. And it was right around the corner, as a matter of fact, from the old Cleveland Arena, which I had an opportunity to go to a couple of times when I was a young kid. I can remember, and again, older members of this organization, probably have stories going back much farther than myself, but living on East 33rd, I can remember the streetcars taking us downtown to the May Company and Higbee's, and to the shows at the Palace Theater and those types of things. I remember the coal being delivered to the coal chute and dropped off every winter. And I remember stoking the furnace and throwing coal in there as a young kid. I can also remember the ice that the milkman gave us. That they didn't have refrigeration back then. They just had big chunks of ice on top of the milk bottles, and they would give us the kids a big chunk of ice when we'd come out to their delivery truck. I can remember a guy coming down the street in a horse-drawn wagon, collecting papers and rags, and probably the first recycling that was going on at that time. And it might have even been the same guy later on in the summer would come with a wagon full of watermelons. Waddy waddy melon, he'd yell out, and everybody come out and buy a watermelon. We had Dave's Supermarket, and I was just an article in the Plain Dealer the other day about it moving from East 33rd and Payne Avenue out to East 59th. There aren't any grocery stores, there aren't any Costco's or Sam's Clubs. Heinen's moved downtown. Those are types of things that the inner city needs, and for those people that can't get around, this is going to be a major adjustment for them. It's not that far down the street, but East 59th isn't East 33rd for some of these people that are immobile. The thing about living downtown, it was very ethnic. I can remember Germans having smokehouses in their backyard. My grandparents had chickens and a garden on East 50th Street. I can remember Immaculate Conception Catholic Church. And every once in a while, we'd go to High Mass. Now, if you're not Catholic, they come out for an extra 15 minutes after about an hour and a half. And as a 6-year-old, I didn't want to see that part of the service. But right next to it was a butcher shop, or a poultry shop that had live chickens. You go out and pick your own chicken, and they'd put it to death for you, put it in a bag and take it home. Not like you have now, where you just get it and it's already prepared for you at Heinen's. And
You are old.
I am old. Remember that stuff. The other thing that was really neat about living on that street, the lady 2 doors down from me worked at the Cleveland Municipal Stadium, and she ran the ice cream stand. And for a little kid, it was like, seventh heaven. Her daughter was about the same age. We'd go to the games with her, and we'd sit up in the ramp, 2 seats right up at the top, and then trot down there for a nickel cone every once in a while. And you can't even imagine that. She left us there at 6 or 7 years old, and we had. I just remember having a great time, and having ice cream to boot was the cherry on top on the frosting. We moved to Maple Heights in 1955. That was the burbs. It was one of those post-war communities that grew like a weed. A lot of bungalows still there, a lot of small colonials. It was Kitty City. I remember going there, and I mean everybody had kids. We basically made our own fun. I can remember we had a baseball diamond that we built ourselves, which is now 480. But we had a home run fence. We dug dugouts. We had a backstop. We had fixed the field day every Wednesday. Everybody bring their push lawnmowers out and try to cut the grass and keep it pretty nice. My dad had a 50 Hudson that he'd tie a railroad tied to a chain and drive around in a circle and drag the infield for us, because we had a dirt infield. And we would have double headers every day during the summer. And we'd play the first game, go home for lunch, and come back and play the second game. In the winter, or as fall came, we played tackle football, and none of us belonged to any organized sports. And it's one of the things that I think is missing in this day and age. And somebody mentioned at one time, if you go to a Little League practice and you watch the kids, they sit on the bench until the coach shows up to tell them what to do. And it's, where are the pickup games anymore? And where's that type of thing in regards to interaction with kids? But, maybe that's progress. Went out for football as a freshman. None of us did organized sports until we got into high school. So I went out for football, and I was, I think, 5'6" and 120 pounds. A blue twisted steel. We had 45 kids, if I can remember right, and again, my memory might be not that great, but we had 45 kids out and 33 uniforms, so they had to cut. And wasn't the brightest bulb. The coach got everybody around after a couple days of practice and called us into a little huddle and started to read off the names, and they were my friends were getting cut, and I'm saying, oh man, thank God, it's not me. He was going in alphabetical order. I'm an S. They got to my name. I can remember walking home, and it was several blocks, and man, it was just crushed. But that was what it was. 33 kids, and they had a great team that year, and went on to have a really good season. And my sophomore year, man, I said, geez, that was just so much fun, getting cut, trying out. Let me do that again. But this time they had enough uniforms, so I was able to, stay on the team and that type of thing. But I had a great time, and I think that's where I first started to have a relationship with teachers and coaches that made me feel like, I was important. I was part of something. I was part of a team. So that was the first instance for me. I ended up going out for track that same year, my sophomore year. And another great thing that happened is, again, I was a little string bean, but I was fairly fast, so I was able to run in some varsity meets. And our coach, who unfortunately was his last year, but at the banquet, we had to have 20 points to letter. And I knew I had 18. And I knew I wasn't going to letter. So at the banquet, he stands up and he gives the letters to all the upperclassmen, and he said, we have one special letter to give. We've got a sophomore that really worked hard, and went out there and just every day was there for us, and went on and on and on. And I'm starting to scoot up on the end of my chair. I'm ready to stand up. I'm really excited. I'm going to let her as a sophomore. It was our manager. He lettered the manager. I had 18 out of 20 points. Well, the next year we had 3 brand new coaches, and these guys were great. They were young guys. They were all fired up, and we just, we took off in a blaze of glory, and we ended up having a couple of great seasons in track and field. And again, it was one of those types of things where you get paired up by chance or whatever. And these people were really inspirational. They were also my JV football coaches, and we ended up, moving on to varsity together, and the rest is kind of history. Maple Heights at the time our class was the biggest class that ever went through. It was first class over 500, and it was a blue-collar community. Less than 20% of the kids went on to college, and I know, from my own standpoint, I was not a very good student. I struggled. I was in the college prep program, and my junior year was a grade disaster. I probably couldn't have done more poorly if I tried. But I remember team teaching English, and we had 3 teachers. There were 150 kids in the class. And these are the smartest kids in school, and I parked myself as far back in the back row as I could. I was overwhelmed. We had a term paper that was 5 grades, traced the philosophies of religion from colonial times through Western expansion. I had no idea what they were talking about. 5 grades? I didn't even want to tell you what I got on that thing. We had a girl named Eva Lapshinsky. Eva stood up in front of the group and memorized The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. If anybody ever see that poem? 12 stanzas, all 12 of them. I'm back there going, there's no way I'm ever going to do that. So the junior year comes screeching to an end, and I ended up getting back into regular classes. And I had an English teacher that was really a great guy. And, he knew I was struggling. He said, you can do this in regards to college. You can do this, but here's what you have to do in regards to buckle down. He sat down with me and went through, how I have to start studying. And then we ended up at Menor in a track meet, and he's a timer out there. He lived out in Menor. And we ended up winning a relay race. It might have been the mile relay, and he comes up to me and goes, "By Jove, Ed, good show," and that type of thing. These are guys that, really were inspirational. I had a guidance counselor that if you didn't go to the Ivy Leagues, you didn't go. No offense, George. Didn't go to college. And he told me, he said, don't waste your time and your parents' money. And at the same time, our football coaches were taking us during the winter months and loading up a couple, 3 cars and going to see Kent State University, Edinburgh, Mount Union, Marietta, Muskingum, Heidelberg College. They were taking their time to make sure that we had some choices. And we ended up at all those schools. We had a pretty big senior class, and we kind of scattered into the wind. But a lot of us went to college, and a lot of us competed and completed college. So that was pretty great experience. And I owe a lot of my success to those coaches in the formation of some of the things that you went through. And when you face adversity a little bit, like I always said, you can prove them right or you can prove them wrong. You prove that guidance counselor right or wrong. And thank goodness, again, I had people that believed in me at that time. At Heidelberg, I started in 65, and I can remember, being on the football team. We had freshmen were just the scout team players, and those of you who are familiar with football, it's basically you're just getting drubbed by the varsity, and you'd run the other team's plays against the first team defense and stuff. And we had a really good team. As a matter of fact, one of our defensive end was 6'3". He was 265 pounds, was first team All-League, and ended up playing for the San Diego Chargers, the Cleveland Browns, and the New Orleans Saints during his NFL career. And I was in charge of trying to block this kid. And one time I ended up kind of getting in his way, and our back gained about 2 yards, and the coach made us run the play 8 times in a row. So my face mask was sideways. I was looking out the ear hole. By the time I was done, this guy just pummeled me. But those were, kind of lessons you learn in regards to playing. Freshmen at that time weren't even eligible, and I wouldn't have, made it anyway. My sophomore year, I come back out, and there are 15 tailbacks. I think Little Heidelberg College, and I'm like 15th string. I couldn't even see the quarterback from where I was standing in the scheme of things. And people change positions and whatever, and luckily I was able to begin to play. But that was an experience. I had football, track. I joined a fraternity, Excelsior Men's Literary Society. Started at 1851. Now in 1851, they actually read books and they reported, and they had like study things. That didn't quite happen with the Excelsior Men's Literary Society I knew. And then studying. So it was football, track, fraternity, studying, kind of in that order when I started out, which was probably not the way to do. We used to have, at Heidelberg, there was sit-down dinners in the dorm, freshman and sophomore years, and you had to dress up for it. I had one clip-on tie. I didn't own a coat. And, we'd go to dinner, and we'd sit with 4 girls and 4 boys, and they'd just mix you up every day with a different group. So my freshman year, I'm at a table with one of the guys I went to Heidelberg, or high school with, Tony Monachino, who was a real card. And we sit down with 4 girls, and one of them happened to be Mary Linder, who happens to be Mary Linder Sogan right now. But we're getting ready for dinner, and Tony says, well, Ed's going to be a priest, so he's going to say grace. And so I go along with the whole thing and say this, wonderful grace, blah, blah, blah. And she thought I was going to be a priest until I asked her out my sophomore year. I finally got the courage, which was a shocker. I said it was a loss to the Catholic Church, but a plus for marriage. Well, we started dating my sophomore year, and as George mentioned, I used to go to the library, and we had study dates, and we would share notes. They were her notes, but I would share them in regards to to getting by, and some pretty good courses. They had lit and fine arts and some of these courses that were pretty tough, and she was a great note taker, and because of her and our study dates, I was able to become a better and better student, and ended up halfway decent as an academician in addition to athletics. I can't remember, we graduated together, both of us had education degrees. I can't remember a lot of things about finances, but again, for us that were, from that day and age, pay is relative, but I can remember starting off in teaching in Maple Heights and taking home $400 a month. I had a car. Everybody had to have a new car. Shared an apartment with a couple of guys, insurance and incidentals and things. By the end of the month, there was no money left. We were eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, if there was peanut butter and jelly in the condo or in the apartment. I coached track from January to the second week in June when we had the state meet, and it was $250. And we went 6 days a week. But we had a great group of kids. As a matter of fact, we had Maple Heights had a cinder track until 2 years ago, and hadn't had a home track meet in 20 years because everybody else had all-weather tracks and that type of thing. So we got our group together from 1975 that had won the John Adams District Track Meet as a suburban league team. And we had kids come in from all over the country from that team to celebrate the opening of that track. And it was great to see what those young men have accomplished, where they were in life, and the success that they had personally and in business. So that was really a neat experience for us. There's some famous Ed Sogan quotes, and I've got a lot of them, but I'll just give you a couple. I'm never going to teach, and I'm never moving back to my hometown. So my first job as a teacher in Maple Heights. Moved into Hudson, and I'll talk a little bit about the first house, but Plymouth Village, and I'm not sure we were part of it, but our second house was back there off of a Barlow Road. But my quote prior to that was, "I'll never live in a development." So we ended up buying this house, and we lived in there for 10 years. It was a great house and a great location, and we had a wonderful time there. Drove past the condos, Morris Road. They're called the villas. Who in the heck, and I didn't use that term, would want to live there? Mary and I moved in about 8 years ago now. But those are, types of things that, open mouth, insert foot type of situations that I had. We married in 1970, and we moved into Hudson in 1973. We were living in Wild Lake Apartments across from Walsh. Ended up driving into Hudson. We saw, a house for sale on Atterbury. We didn't know Atterbury, we didn't know Hudson. Knew Debbie Kern because I taught with her in Maple Heights, and knew that they had moved into Hudson. So we're driving up and down Atterbury, and we see this house, and it's for sale by owner, and we drive by, and we turn around, we drove by, and we drove by again. I think we went by 5 or 6 times before we finally pulled in the driveway. And then a couple months later, we were moved in. We moved in August of that year. The house had a pool. This was a model home back in, I don't know when those houses were built, those old ranch homes. I mean, it had to be post-war, either late 40s, early 50s. But it was half of an egg, the pool, and it was a concrete pool, and it had a 2-car garage. I mean, I was like in hog heaven. This is fantastic. I'm coming from Maple Heights, and we're out here in Hudson, Ohio, and we have our own home. So we moved into the house, dropped off all the furniture, and the first thing I did after everything was moved in was jump in the pool. Now, the guy we bought the house off of was an assistant manager at Kmart, and he was a little frugal. So I jump in the pool, and I was saying, man, there's something on the bottom of my foot. He had patched the pool with tar. So he had painted over it, and he didn't let anybody in it the whole summer till I got in there. And I had paint and tar on the bottom of my foot. And what had happened, there was a water table so high on that street, as, we all know from the flood and everything else, that they left it empty for safety purposes during the winter. And the thing just kind of popped out of the ground and kind of shattered a little bit. So every spring, I'd patch it all up with professional pool patch. I'd paint the darn thing, and I had a floating lawn chair. It was great. It was fantastic. Well, we lived in that house for several years, and then we moved to Chatham, and then we moved over on Wood Spring, and now we're over here. So we've had 4 houses in Hudson. But it was a great start and a great community. I was lucky enough, and again, we moved in '73, and I was lucky enough to get a job in Hudson. There was a middle school physical education teacher that was moving out to Arizona, and I had interviewed for the job, and Bob Motice was the principal, and Bill Plesser was the superintendent, and they called me in, and I was painting houses. I painted houses in Hudson for 20 years. So I had my bibbed overalls on. I just looked like a mess, had paint all over, and they called me in at the last minute. I had this interview, and they said, well, we'll make a decision in a couple weeks, and lucky enough, I got the job here. So that was the start of being here in Hudson. Mary was teaching in Copley, so it was a great location for us in regards to living here in Hudson when I was at Maple Heights and Southeast, and then certainly as I started teaching here. Football was something, again, that was really a staple for me. Coaching football and track are completely different sports. You're so intense for football. Everything is, I was exhausted at the end of the season. And, playoffs weren't a part of the picture, back when I first started coaching. So it was 10 weeks of the season, but it was also the preseason during the summer and summer practices and those 2-a-days and those types of things. So we had, a great opportunity to work with the kids, track 13 different events. From the shot, the disc, to the high jump, to the pole vault, we had kids that were successful at each one of those. The sprints, the relays. I love track because if you think about it and you have good relay teams, that's 4 kids that are performing at a high level, then that trickles down to all those other events that they enter. And we always had kids that were multiple event kids. And it was a neat thing, and it was totally different. It was a kind of a relaxed type thing. Obviously, you get excited before things, and even football and track, we'd say, it's all right to get butterflies. It's all right to get a little bit pumped up. It's all right to get a little bit excited, but you don't want to get carried away. So we said, we want to have butterflies, but we want them fine in formation. We want to control them. We want them working for you. Because sometimes, again, you get so darn nervous that, you just can't perform. You're so uptight. So those were types of things that we try to teach, to the kids as they were going through these sports. Couple things about football, and I'll relate a couple of stories that, obviously is one of them. One of the things that I had an opportunity to do, related to coaches and what they meant to me, this past winter down in Florida, I had an opportunity to go to one of my college football coaches' 80th birthday party. And his name is Jim Gruden. And Jim Gruden's from Orange, went to Heidelberg, and ended up high school coaching at Fremont Ross. Then he went over to Gallion as a head coach. Then he came to Heidelberg as an assistant, and kind of moved on a little bit. He went to Dayton, went to Indiana, was on the Notre Dame National Championship team with Coach Devine up there, and was a quarterback coach for Joe Montana. He started coaching me. That's how he started off. He said, man, I can only go up from here. I can remember being at Bluffton College, and this is a story I told at his birthday party, and Bluffton College is associated with the Mennonites, and they had their first all-college dance my junior year when we were playing them up at Bluffton. And I can remember Coach Gruden. Now remember, this guy ended up at Notre Dame, he ended up at Tampa Bay, and then with the 49ers. He's in a crow's nest. So those of you that are old enough remember, they didn't have press boxes back in the day. They just had like a little basket, and you would climb up there on a ladder and stand in this basket. It was probably no bigger than this lectern, and be able to call the plays. And a lot of times you could probably just shout them down because you're only 10 feet up in the air. And I can remember looking up at him and, hey, coach, can I go in the game? He said, yeah, go ahead. He gave me a play, and I ran in. This is the guy that coached a national championship team and coached in the NFL and started off in that type of humble beginnings in regards to that. Now, Jim Gruden, who you may not know, but you might know John Gruden, his son, and Jay Gruden, his other son. Well, John was a coach of the Raiders, and then Super Bowl champion, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and now an announcer. He kind of emceed the birthday party. He was running around like a Energizer bunny. And then he ended up, again, at the next day, going to the Pro Bowl and announcing that game in Orlando, Florida. But that's a type of family, that you have. And it doesn't happen to everybody, but you see what you have to do to be a college coach. And I'm very glad that I remained at the high school level and was able to be stationary for not only me, but for my family. A couple other high school stories. Oh, I got a little thing about Division I scholarships. I looked this up yesterday. There are approximately, this is according to the NCAA statistics, 7,800,000 high school athletes. 480,000 of those will go on to college. It's about 6%. 2% will go on to the pros. If it's the same as when I was in coaching and as an AD, there are only football, men's and women's basketball, and volleyball, women's volleyball, that have full scholarships. Everybody else is a partial scholarship. So I think one of the things that happens with, people as they look at athletics is say, man, I'm going to get a Division I scholarship. It isn't that easy. The numbers, it is a pyramid, and it gets awfully tough to get to that next level. And especially when you're talking about playing Division I sports. Two examples we have, actually three. Billy Nagy, is no longer in professional football, but he went up to Wisconsin, was an offensive lineman for us, and was an offensive lineman for Wisconsin, and was a big kid and very, very talented, and ended up playing and starting for the Dallas Cowboys, but he had a bad ankle from a previous injury, and has given that up and is in the business industry right now, but a big kid. We have Brian Winters now, who's with the Jets. They have him listed at 6'4", 320 pounds. In addition to having a great wingspan, he's got some great tats. Brian was one tough cookie. He played at Kent State University, was an outstanding player for them, and just finished his rookie contract, so he is re-upped with the Jets and is making some pretty serious money. 6'4", 320-pound offensive lineman. Those are some big kids. And you got to be that size for people to even be looking at you for recruiting. You know, just look down the roster at Ohio State or Michigan or whatever. Speaking of Michigan, Ben Gideon. Ben, you know, I always laughed about the male of the species. Girls, when they came to high school, were ready to compete at the varsity level in a lot of cases. They were mature, not only physically, but mentally. Boys, man, they're all over the place. Not too many of them. I call them pencil necks because, you know, again, they're just starting to grow, you know, from 8th to 9th to 10th grade and starting to fill out. Well, Ben Gideon came in. He was ready to play. He was a starter from, you know, day one when he was a freshman. I mean, big, strong kid. But he also had two brothers that were outstanding athletes. His oldest brother was at Harvard, 2-year starter at linebacker. And his middle brother went to the Naval Academy and played at I don't know what I think it's lightweight football and another sport there, and I think he might be in submarines right now. But just a tremendous family, and a sister that was into dance and that type of thing, and was a tremendous student at Hudson High School. So great family. But Ben graduated, and he's, you know, they have him listed now in the programs and stuff at 6'3", 247 pounds. He was a running back for us. Now, he wasn't 240, but he was 230 when he was a senior. And he goes on to Michigan, has a great career. He's behind some tremendous players, which ends up at, you know, those places. But he goes to the combine, and they have a little test on the bench press. And my bench press anymore is like a toothpick and 2 marshmallows, and I try to push it up there. They put on 225 pounds, and he did it 27 times. He was the best, I think, in the whole combine in regards to that particular strength. And it kind of measures your desire in the weight room, your overall strength and that type of thing. But they have listed that he did great in the standing long jump and the shuttle run. He was like second in linebackers and that type of thing. So he's got a shot. But again, it gets tougher. I mean, you know, we were talking, 2% of all those players in Division I that may make it to the NFL. So those are types of things that you look at when you look at athletes. We heard from Brant Evans. He was a trip. What do they call it? ADD? Is that the term that you use? ADHD, yeah. And I mean, he's just hyper. He was, always a big kid, always into this, that, and the other. He just couldn't concentrate. And he said it himself. He said he got into the restaurant industry, and he felt like with all this chaos, he was in control. He found his passion. But he didn't have that in high school. We had an assistant principal, Chris Romano, which some of you might remember. I think Tom probably spent some time in her office. But Chris was a little peanut, and she just had a gift of working with kids like that. And I think she stepped, on her tiptoes and kind of drug Brant around, but she got him through high school. And he'll credit her with a lot of the success he has in regards to at least graduation. And then, again, he went on to, those great things. He mentioned the fact, again, the 12-minute run. For a kid that size, he comes in his senior year. I said, Brant, how much you weigh? So, well, last time I was on the scale, he's a little bigger than he was then. Last time I was on the scale, I weighed 225 pounds. I said, well, that's great, Brant, get on the scale. He was 275. 275. Brant, 225, 275. He was in horrible shape. And we just, again, he He's not a distance runner at that size, but we had the 12-minute run, and he had to run 4 laps in 12 minutes or whatever it was, and he just couldn't make it. And like he said, we went out every morning, and he didn't get a break. He had to go at a time, and I'm running his clock, and I'm giving his times per lap, and he didn't make it, and he didn't make it, and he didn't make it, and he didn't make it. The whole time he's working real hard, and we didn't give him a uniform. He had to go through all the conditioning drills and everything else, and he was always doing extra stuff because he was always getting in trouble. But he ended up, again, getting down to about 255 pounds. And he ended up playing and being a player for us. As he mentioned with the 12-minute run, that last day, and he wasn't going to get a uniform, of 2-a-days, he had to make that time. The entire team and the coaching staff went out to the track with him. That's what team is. Those kids ran with him, and they went, again, I'm talking 75 kids running with one kid that didn't make it. That's what it's about. We got another kid, Mike Wargo. Mike is now a financial guy, a stockbroker in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Mike came to us from Pennsylvania, where his family had a farm and everything else, moved into Hudson, was a great kid, hard worker, limited athletic ability, but he was, again, a giant kid for us, 6'3", 245. He was an offensive tackle for us. And he always had a big smile on his face, always worked as hard as he could. He comes to the end of his senior year, he wants to go to Penn State. That's where his family was kind of a legacy. He didn't get in. But at that time, he got into Ohio State. I told him he could play at Mount Union, a Division III school, and that type of thing, but he's bound and determined he was going to go to Division I school and he was going to be on the football team. Well, Mike Wargo, back in that day, was Coach Cooper was the head coach, and you would have tryouts. You'd have walk-on tryouts. And it was, like his freshman year, and then, the middle of the year, and at the end of the year. And he tried 3 times, and he finally made the team as a walk-on athlete. Mike was on the team for 4 years. He was a scout team offensive tackle against some of the best players in the country, and just getting the bejeebers beat out of him every single day. But he kept plugging away. He got up to 300 pounds. He was one of the strongest kids, one of the hardest workers in the weight room. Always had a big smile on his face. We used to go down for the Ohio State football clinic. And it was a big deal because the coaches from all around the state and, Pennsylvania, Michigan stuff would go to the Ohio State football clinic. They would put on, all their coaches would talk. They would have guest speakers from all over the country come and talk to us, talk about different things that you could take back to your program. It was really neat, and we got to see the spring game. We got to be in Woody Hayes Center, which is a big indoor facility there. I can remember Mike, just a big smile on his face with all his Hudson coaches around him and that type of thing. And, again, this kid didn't have a chance in Hades to get on the field, but he was on that team. We went to see a football game. As a matter of fact, Steve was playing, my son was playing at Wittenberg over at Oberlin. So we watched the Wittenberg-Oberlin game, and then we jumped in the car, a bunch of the Hudson coaches, and we turn on the radio, the Ohio State game. It's late in the game. Kurt Herbstreit, who's not a big-time announcer, was a sideline guy. And when he started out, and, he's on the sideline, he's talking about this, that, and the other thing. He says, ho, Coach Cooper's calling for Mike Wargo. I'm going, whoa, what the heck is this? This is Ohio State's Rudy is going to go into the game. You've seen the movie Rudy about Notre Dame. That's what they considered Mike, because he was the hardest worker out there. He pushed everybody, and it was the end of the Penn State game, the team that he wanted to go to. Mike played one play. They interviewed him on TV. They had him on radio. Herbstreit's going nuts. We're going crazy because he finally gets a chance to get in the game. He's got a Big Ten championship ring. His classmates come back, his teammates come back to a game every year from all over the place, and they're big boys. I mean, I don't think Mike's seen 300 pounds lately, but they're big kids. And they are just happy as a clam to be at a Hudson football game and reminisce the time that they had at HHS. So those are types of things, again, that I take away. When I was a coach, I had 2 0-10 seasons. Those weren't fun. We had one at Maple Heights, and we were in the Lake Erie League, and we had tremendous talent. Bedford had a kid, quarterback, that went to Ohio State. Mayfield had a kid that was a quarterback that went to Purdue. Well, Mentor had a kid that was a tailback that went to Miami of Florida. We got killed. 47-7, 68-6. Last game against Berea, 73-0. The coach from Berea comes across. He said, "There's nothing I could have done. You could have got people out of the stands and not had to score 73-0. And we were scoring those 6s and 7s. Those were when they put in their like 5th string and we were able to get a touchdown. We had a good group of kids, but we just didn't have a whole lot of athletes. In 1979, we had the same thing happen at Hudson High School. We had 33 kids out, and they were good kids, but we weren't big, and we weren't real strong, and we weren't real great athletes, and we didn't do a real good job coaching them. 33 kids, we couldn't even go full go offense and defense. We had to go half line. And by the time you get to the end of the season, you're all banged up and everything else, so we were, patching everybody else and putting them out on the field. We had a coach that for every touchdown against us, he was our conditioning guy. For every touchdown the opponent scored against us on Friday night, we did 100-yard bear crawls on Monday. How'd you like to look forward to that all weekend long? And we had some big kids. Now, Scott Lee wasn't on that team, but the Belly Bunch was, part of that whole conditioning process. And these kids, they couldn't do bear crawls to save their lives. 10 yards, 100 yards for touchdown after touchdown after touchdown. I went to Jerry Reeves. I quit at the end of that season. I couldn't take it. He said, well, just, hang in there. I think we're going to undergo a coaching change and things will get better. We got a guy named Fred Johnson came in. 1980. 8-2 from 0-10. He said, we're going to have 55 to 60 guys for summer conditioning. And we're all going, yeah, right. The coaches, that isn't going to happen. We had 55 to 60 kids at summer conditioning. I remember him being at a pep rally, and he took the microphone, and they didn't have the cordless ones. He just yanked the whole cord out of the wall. He was all fired up. It was great. We couldn't have had a better year. We almost beat Solon, and I think we lost to Revere in the last game of the season. They were really tough and ended up winning the league that year. But what a great year. What a great experience. I was, from down lower in the snake's belly with 0-10 to an 8-2. I'm back. I'm excited. He left. Fred Johnson left. He went back to Minerva where he coached, and we went to high school and played high school there. 4 years later, they fired him. He walked on water at Hudson, but he gave that up. Bill Edwards coached the next year, and then he was just doing it at interim type thing, and then I was the 4th head coach in 4 years. That's tough. God, it's tough for kids. That was, and I coached head coach for 13 years. The teams were never phenomenal, but I had a great time. And I had a great coaching staff. Chuck Schilling, who works for the school still. Jeff Brown was my defensive coordinator. I just saw Jeff Hildebrand up in the press box announcing the track meet. Dave Spahn, who's the math teacher at the high school, and we had and Jim Nold, who's still at the middle school. We had a great coaching staff. We had great kids. We had Division III kids that played well. We didn't have the Brian Winters-sized kid. But those are types of things that I take from that. But I appreciate the opportunity. I think what happened. Holy cow! I got carried away. We got an opportunity to see. I thought I wasn't going to have enough time to cover whatever. I got half of this to go. I'll come back next week. But I wanted to compliment the Rotary and Jim Hackney for getting me into all these different organizations, et cetera. But one of the things that I think all of us can do a little bit, and I know Ron and his wife help out with the Red Cross blood drive at St. Mary's. When I was in 7th grade, I ruptured my spleen. Four guys from my dad's shop came to the hospital at Suburban Hospital and gave blood, and I thought that was pretty neat. So when I got out of college and started teaching, I started giving a little bit. A couple months ago, I gave my 21st gallon. So pay it forward. Thank you very much. Sorry it takes so much time.
Thanks, Ed. We'll get the book. We'll have you back. You can finish the you can finish the story.
3-minute Rotary.
Okay. Thanks to the audiovisual crew, Den, Rich. When you pitch in, you're kind of the guy that comes in at the last minute, Den. Tom Page, Tom Tobin, James Field, and Ron Barnhouse. And thanks to our greeters, Kelly Brennan and Jim Young. Today's Rotabuck. Payout is $9, and the jackpot is $140. I'll have the speaker pull the ticket.
39315. Checking his own at the same time.
Last four, 9315. 9315.
Yes. There you go.
Ah!
That's why you were standing.
All right.
No.
Ah!
Thank you, sir.
No luck today. Next week's speaker will be Patty Harris, CEO of Camp Quality. And today, in honor of the season, a little baseball quote from a colorful manager, Tommy Lasorda. I walk into the clubhouse today, and it's like walking into the Mayo Clinic. We have 4 doctors, 3 therapists, and 5 trainers. Back when I broke in, we had 1 trainer who carried a bottle of rubbing alcohol, and by the 7th inning, he'd drunk it. We're adjourned. See everybody next week.